People of the internet, welcome back to another video. It is I, Don Thomas, back in here with another one. As always, folks, the likes, the comments, the subscribes are all greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for the support on this channel. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into today's topic, folks. I got a video pulled up here. Comes from CNBC, in which they entitled the video, "Why Food Prices Are Still So High in the US." Of course, folks, done videos before talking about people struggling to find jobs, our U.S. economy, people wanting to quit their jobs, people, all sorts of things revolving around our socioeconomic status here in the United States. And I too wonder why the food prices are too high. Let's talk about inflation in a video not too long ago in terms of I was under the impression that inflation went up and down and fluctuated, whatever the case is, but it seems like inflation went up and it stayed up. People having a hard time securing means of income. It seems like you have to do multiple things in order to live financially stable. I eat food, you eat food, so of course I thought this would be a little bit interesting. I would like to know why the food prices are still so high in the United States. Let's see if we can gather a little bit more insight.
Inflation has steadily cooled over the past 2 years, despite seeing a slight stall in October and November of 2024. Prices for items like gasoline, used cars, and energy have declined accordingly. But food prices continue to outpace inflation, increasing by 28% since 2019.
I just spent $33 on dinner tonight. I'm literally just making like lasagna soup.
What are you talking about? Was $8.25 now $6.89? Like this is some amazing deal.
For 4 chicken breasts, $10 to $11.
86% of consumers reported feeling frustrated with rising grocery prices, and over a third said they have resorted to buying fewer items to save money.
That's one of the real gauges people have of their cost of living because it's an important aspect of their cost of living. And it's something that we have a lot of exposure to. We go to the grocery store, we pick up the different products, we look at the prices.
So why are grocery prices still so high? And what can be done to bring the costs down?
Just pause it right there before they go into a little bit further, man. Very interesting, folks. It's a bit frustrating if you ask me, as they said in the video. Was it 86% of people are confused as to why the prices are so high, man? Our everyday things just to feed our families. And I even said it as well too. I'm just a single man, and I know how much I spend on groceries every week, every other week. It's just me. Let alone the people who have multiple mouths to feed within their household. I can only imagine what your grocery tab alone looks like. Let's not talk about all of your other expenses, your card note, your internet, your electricity, things of that nature. We're solely talking about food here, folks. We all got to eat. The thing that gets me a little bit as well, too, as the video was kind of going, and I was thinking to myself as well, too, it's just like the price of these groceries run up, and then all the time we're hearing about recalls on these foods, people getting sick off of these foods, and what's being tampered with, and this, that, and the other. So it's just like we're paying high prices for poison. Sounds a little bit more frustrating to me, if you ask me. So I want to watch a little bit more. Let's see if there's a little bit more insight, man. Why the price is still so high? Of course, I'm learning a lot in terms of inflation and things of that nature. Let's see if we can gather a little bit more insight.
Like any other business, food processors, manufacturers, and retailers face various operating costs to get food from the farm to the grocery aisle. These costs play a key role in how products are priced. Just 15.9 cents for every dollar spent on food goes to the farm that actually produced it.
There's so much more that goes into the cost of our food than just the actual food itself. There's a lot that goes into the producing it, moving it around, the transportation, the marketing, getting it on the shelves. It's not just the food. It's all of the inputs that go into it.
Unexpected global events set the stage for a sudden rise in food costs.
It was a global pandemic. There were disruptions all around the world in terms of production. At the same time that you just have this unexpected, unprecedented wave of demand, that is a recipe for it to really break down and you to go into the grocery store and see empty shelves or go into the grocery store and see really higher prices.
The surge in inflation added more pressure on food manufacturers and retailers.
All the costs that are incurred after the farm, it's all the processing costs, the energy costs, the wage costs, all these things contributed to much, much higher prices. And these all were rising from about mid-21 onward, and they continue to rise.
Really what you've had experienced since 2021 is sort of this massive, what we call cost pass-through that has occurred. The idea of cost pass-through is just, imagine I'm a manufacturer. I'm producing an item, and let's say it's a case of product. It costs me $10. I may turn around and sell that for, let's say, $18. Let's say my costs go up 20%. Now, all of a sudden, that means I'm paying $12 for, this product, or I'm incurring a $12 cost to make it. At minimum, I have to now charge $20. But likely I'm going to charge a little bit more than $20 because I have to protect what we call my gross margin rate. That goes to the wholesaler. Well, the wholesaler is now seeing a $2.50 increase. They not only have to raise their selling price by $2.50, but they may raise it by $2.75 to the grocery store. The grocery store now sees $2.75 of greater cost. So they may end up charging $3 more overall because everybody's trying to protect their margin as we move through the supply chain.
Pause it right there real quick, man. Very interesting graphic. I like graphics, man. I'm a visual learner, so that helped me a lot. In terms of the process, by the time it gets to us, the consumer, how it goes for the manufacturer, the wholesaler, the producer, this, that, and the other, it's very interesting, man. The whole process that goes behind our food. And how we, have the luxury of going to a grocery store, picking out what we pick from our aisles, whatever the case is, coming home, preparing it, and eating it. There's a process beforehand that takes place, man. And it makes me wonder. A lot of things as I was watching that clip made me wonder, man. Food processing, man. I want to cut out meat. I've been saying that for a long time. That's neither here nor there. But just how seeing how chickens and stuff is being handled, I want to cut out meat altogether. But nonetheless, I mean, it makes sense, right? Economically speaking, okay, of course, if it's costing the manufacturer X amount of dollars more and that because of supplies and this, that, and the other, then they got to raise their margin a little bit, and it trickles down to us as well, too. Everybody has to pay the increased fee. But what's the solution, though, folks? I always like to do these videos, of course, that allows us to kind of think a little bit and maybe offer up some solutions, right? What's the alternative? What can people do to see to it that they can at least afford the bare minimum to feed their families? And it's definitely not helping with people losing their jobs or getting laid off and just being burnt out from work, where it's just like your back is against the wall. One of the things that I always think about as well, too, man, you hear this saying all the time, desperate times call for desperate measures. What are people going to start doing when they feel like their back is against the wall and food prices are too high and they can't sufficiently feed their families? Or there's maybe food shortages. I've been hearing stories about food shortages and this, that, and the other, or, farmers wanting to start protesting because they feel like their wages are not equally paid, or their regulations that they're trying to put on our farmers a little bit strenuous as well too. What happens when enough is enough? What happens when people can't take it anymore, folks? And people are fed up. We all got to eat, as I've been saying. So what happens when people feel like, man, I can't afford this food, but I need to get this food one way or another? What are people going to start doing? God forbid calamity strikes in this world, man. I've said it a lot of times, man. Of course, you hear stories about people stocking up on food and people who are fortunate enough to, have a piece of land where they can grow their own food and get chickens and this, that, and the other. That's going to be ideal, man. But I always feel like there's a rebuttal to all of that as well, too. I feel like, again, I was speaking about just the contamination of food and this, that, and the other, the food safety. I feel like the man behind the curtain, or whoever you want to call it, the people or the cases, I feel like there's always going to be a demographic of people out there that are always going to see to it that they're the ones in control, and they're the ones that are reaping the benefits of the everyday things that we need. So I'm trying to think again, as for the average consumer, like me and you, what do we do? It's almost kind of like gas for your vehicle as well, too. I feel like with gas, maybe there's other alternatives. Maybe when gas prices were raising, people were trying to find alternatives where they were turning to Lyft and Uber, whether they were, moving to cities and areas where they weren't so heavily dependent upon vehicles. I feel like there's always a solution for something, but food is one of those tricky ones. Food is something that we need constantly. I saw the stat as well, too, that they were talking about earlier in the video in terms of people feeling like they have to buy less when they go into the grocery store, man, which is, again, depending on how many people you have in your household, which could be a burden. So it's just like, again, folks, I'm trying to think of the solution. Prices went up and stayed up. People are losing their jobs. People are, having a hard time making ends meet. What is the solution for the necessities that we need just to be a participant in this game called life? I always say that, man, it's hard enough as is to be a participant in this game called life. Let me see if there's a little bit more insight in this video as well, too. Very good takeaways, of course, so far. Again, this video comes from CNBC entitled Why Food Prices Are Still So High in the United States. A lot of insight, man. But again, as I'm watching this video, hopefully as you're watching this video as well, too, or maybe not only being, feeling frustrated, as I'm sure we all are, but what is the solution? What is the solution? It can't just be, let's throw our hands up and say, oh, well, it is what it is. Because I feel like that's the approach right now. Like, what are you going to do? Not eat? Right? We have to eat. We have to feed our families. We have to, gain nourishment and things of that nature. So, like, what's the alternative? And the price is still going up and people struggling to make ends meet. See if there's a little bit more insight.
Price goes up, it tends to stay up. The inflation may come back down, so you don't see the big price increases. But outside of widespread depression, we don't tend to see prices falling across the board.
The last time we saw actual decreases in grocery prices that were substantial was really late 2015, but primarily 2016. It's important to remember that that year saw a very sharp drop in oil prices, and also commodity prices came down further. And so you really have sort of a unique set of circumstances that caused actual deflation in food prices in 2016. None of us are expecting that to occur in 2025.
There are some categories where we've seen prices come up and down. Eggs are a good example. Like, they did come back down quite a bit after the big surge. So it's not to say that there aren't individual prices that will come down, but as a category, most goods and services, once that price goes up, it stays up. Because again, you think of a big input cost in a lot of places are things like wage.
Pause right there. Trump says it'll be hard to bring down grocery prices, pins hopes on lower energy costs and better supply chains. So, of course, in that last segment, of course, we saw that prices do go down on some things, but for the most part, when they go up, they stay up. So, of course, they were saying eggs and certain things of that nature, the prices will go up, maybe coming back down a little bit, which I thought was interesting. So my thing is this, right? And I think which is the most frustrating part of it all. In most industries, of course, we're hearing about all the inflation as a whole. Food prices are up, everything is up, right? Why aren't people being compensated equivalent to the current economic state of our nation? If cost of living is going up for the bare necessities, so food prices are up, gas prices are up, childcare, healthcare is up, but wages of the working man is not up, doesn't that sound like a recipe for disaster? That's the part that gets me. Why aren't people being paid generously to keep up with the inflation that's going on in this country? Why is it so hard for people to find jobs? This is like, what are we supposed to do? The economy right now is pretty shitty. The workforce right now is pretty shitty right now. So I'm just like, what is the solution for the 9-to-5ers, the entrepreneurs, whoever? What is the solution when your take-home pay stays here, but everything else is up here? Again, man, I don't want to dive down that rabbit hole right now, but it's just like I made the analogy of the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games, the irony of it all, right? The Hunger Games, the movie, The Hunger Games. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out, at least the first one. The Hunger Games, where the arena gets harder and harder to survive in. The arena that we're battling in, this ecosystem, gets harder and harder because the rules are changing by the people up top. The haves versus the have-nots. And again, you see in that movie, again, just use that movie as an example, you see what desperate times call for in that movie, man. When they pin us against each other for the scraps, while there's other people in different sectors that live luxurious lives and are gluttonous. That's another thing that kind of made me upset as well, too. While I was watching this and I was seeing, okay, all the food and this, that, and the other as it was being processed, another thing that kind of stood out to me is the wastefulness in this country as well, too. I forgot what the stat was. I saw a stat not too long ago, but you know the percentage of food that gets wasted? So you know the food that doesn't get sold, so they'll, send food out to the grocery store. Maybe, it maybe gets damaged on the way or it doesn't get sold. Or just think about those restaurants that throw away their food at the end of every day because it's not fresh anymore or, they can't be sold anymore to the cases. There's a stat. If I had time, of course, I'll look it up as well, too, of the amount of wastefulness in this country as well, too. So it's just like food as a whole, people are struggling to pay for it. And then there's industries in certain households that waste it when they get it. Something's got to give, folks, is the point I'm trying to make. Something's got to give. I don't necessarily know what the solution is. I open up that discourse down in the comment section if you guys feel inclined to do so. What is the solution to high grocery prices? What is the solution to people not having livable wages to feed their families? What's the solution to this inflation problem and the price gouging on food and, what is the solution? More and more problems, less and less solutions. I think I tweeted that not too long ago. More and more problems, less and less solutions. Sounds like a recipe for disaster. I don't know, folks. Those are my thoughts. Of course, I want to hear yours down in the comment section below. As always, the likes, the comments, the subscribes are all greatly appreciated. I will catch you on the next one.